It all started on a crisp Saturday morning, the kind where the sun glints, off the water and everything, feels too perfect to be true. I was taking a leisurely stroll around the lake in my neighborhood, enjoying the peace of a weekend that was supposed to be mine. But tranquility, I soon learned, doesn't last long when a Karen is involved. Her name was Marjorie, the beau, sort of HOA president who treated her position like a crown and her clipboard like a scepter. Over the years, she had made it her mission to micromanage every detail of the lake's community rules, from whether people trimmed their hedges on time to how far a paddle boat could drift from the shore. I had always stayed on her good side, mostly because I preferred not to hear about violations over coffee. That morning, however, she had decided that my presence on the lake was a problem. I had just launched my kayak when I saw her at the water's edge, arms crossed, glaring as though I'd committed a felony rather than holding a paddle. She called out, her voice sharp enough to make the ducks scatter. "You can't use the lake today," she barked. "Only residents in compliance with HOA rules are allowed." I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my patience in check. "Excuse me?" I asked. "I pay HOA fees like everyone else. What rule am I violating?" Her lips tightened. "Your kayak registration sticker is outdated. You were supposed to renew it last month." I glanced at my kayak. The sticker was visible, fresh, and valid. I pointed this out calmly, expecting her to back down. But of course she didn't. Instead, she pulled out her phone, tapping away with a sense of urgency usually reserved for life-or-death situations. "Then I'm calling the cops," she declared, voice rising. At that moment, I knew things were about to escalate. But I had something up my sleeve she didn't know about. "By all means," I said smoothly, still standing on the dock. "Call them." "I'll wait right here," she smirked, confident. "Good, they'll sort this out. You'll see that rules apply to everyone." 5 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up, lights flashing faintly. Marjorie puffed up like a victor in some imaginary courtroom battle. I could see her preparing her speech about enforcing the rules, but when I reached inside my jacket and casually flashed, the badge clipped to my belt, her entire demeanor shifted. Her confident smirk froze, replaced by a ghostly, pale expression. The words she had practiced were gone, lost somewhere between her fear and disbelief. Suddenly, the air felt heavy, and the ducks returned as if nothing had happened. Except Marjorie, still trembling, now aware she had bitten off far more than she could chew. I didn't need to say a word. The badge, the authority it represented, and the unspoken consequences had done all the talking. The officers stepped out of the patrol car, adjusting their belts as they made their way toward the dock. Marjorie straightened herself immediately, her posture snapping into that familiar HOA president stiffness. She marched toward them with the confidence of someone who believed she had the situation completely under control. "He's violating HOA lake rules," she announced before they could even say hello. "I need him removed until he's compliant." The officers exchanged a look, one of those quick, silent conversations people in uniform learn to have without speaking. Meanwhile, I kept my position beside my kayak, calm as ever. I could almost feel the breeze shifting, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and the promise that this interaction was about to turn in a very unexpected direction for her. "Sir?" one of the officers said politely as they approached. "We just need to hear your side." "No problem," I replied, "but before I explain, there's something you should see." I opened my jacket just enough to reveal the badge clipped to my belt. A clean flash. Subtle. Professional. And instantly, everything changed. Both officers stiffened slightly, not out of fear, but recognition. They nodded with a quiet understanding, one that came from knowing exactly what that badge meant. Before they could say a word, I watched the color drain from Marjorie's face, like someone had pulled a plug. Her clipboard almost slipped from her hand. "Wait, what? Why do you have... Is that..." she stammered, her voice cracking. "Yes," I said calmly. "Federal. And before you continue accusing people of wrongdoing, you might want to verify facts first." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, like a fish suddenly yanked out of water and forced to confront the world above the surface. The certainty she had marched in with was gone, replaced by confusion embarrassment, and something she wasn't used to feeling at all: vulnerability. The officers kept their composure. "Ma'am," one of them said gently, "his registration is valid. There's no violation here, and calling us for something like this isn't appropriate." Marjorie blinked rapidly, her composure shattering. I thought," she whispered. "You thought wrong," I replied, firm but not unkind. "Next time, check before you escalate. People live here to relax, not to be harassed." The officers nodded in agreement, then politely excused themselves. The patrol car rolled away, leaving the quiet of the lake settling back into place. Even the ducks seemed to pause and observe the moment. Marjorie, still pale, stood frozen, her authority shaken, her confidence cracked. And that was the first time she realized that her clipboard power didn't work on everyone. For the next few days, the neighborhood buzzed quietly with curiosity, though few dared speak openly about the incident. Word travels fast in a lakefront community where gossip flows as freely as the water, and Marjorie's failed attempt at enforcing her self-made rules had become the subject of hushed whispers behind trimmed hedges and over backyard fences. I, of course, maintained my usual routine. Mornings were for kayaking, afternoons for paperwork, and evenings for a quiet walk along the shoreline. Yet there was an unspoken awareness in the air. Marjorie had learned a lesson, whether she admitted it or not, and everyone else seemed to feel it too. People gave me polite nods, small smiles, and a little more room when passing by. The aura of authority followed me like the shadow of the trees along the lake, subtle but unmistakable. Then came the confrontation that made it abundantly clear Marjorie hadn't quite processed everything. I was tying my kayak to the dock after a peaceful morning trip when she approached, clipboard in hand, face still tinged with that pale, wary color that had defined her expression the day I flashed my badge. I need to talk to you," she said hesitantly, her voice lower than usual. Normally she would bark orders. Now she seemed almost timid, unsure if I might take offense, or worse. I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "About what?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "The lake rules. The HOA," she began, glancing around nervously as though the ducks themselves were judging her. "I want to make sure everything's clear, for future reference." I suppressed a small smirk. Her attempt at diplomacy was almost pitiful, but also sincere. Maybe she really wanted to avoid another embarrassing encounter. "All right," I said calmly. "Here's what you need to know. My property and I are fully compliant with the HOA rules. If there's ever a question, you verify it first before escalating to law enforcement. Is that understood?" She nodded quickly, almost too eagerly. Yes, I understand. Completely?" "Good," I replied, giving her a measured look. Because threatening neighbors without cause is not only inappropriate, it could be considered harassment. Marjorie flinched at the word but nodded again, silent this time. I could see the gears turning. Humiliation, fear, and the dawning realization that she had overstepped in spectacular fashion. It was a hard lesson for someone who had always wielded authority like a weapon rather than a responsibility. As she walked away, head lowered and clipboard clutched tightly, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and caution. Authority wasn't about intimidation, it was about accountability. I had reminded Marjorie of that, and now it seemed the neighborhood might actually see some peace, for now. Because in communities like this, the calm is always temporary, and people like Marjorie rarely forget a challenge to their control. Week passed, and the lake returned to its usual rhythm. Kayaks sliced through the water, children's laughter echoed from the small beach area, and the ducks went about their business as if nothing had happened. Yet, under the surface, subtle changes were taking shape. Marjorie had noticeably pulled back from her usual patrols, her previously constant presence around the docks reduced to occasional, hesitant appearances. It was almost as if she had learned that not every battle was hers to fight. I was tying up my kayak one morning when I noticed her across the lake, pacing near the shore. Her posture had softened, less rigid, less commanding, and she seemed to be muttering to herself, perhaps rehearsing the right words, or maybe just reconciling with the embarrassment she had endured. I kept my distance, not wanting to provoke her further, yet I remained within sight. Some lessons need to sink in slowly, and this was clearly one of them. Then, without warning, she called out my name. I turned, wary, only to see her raising a hand in a tentative wave. I wanted to thank you, she said, her voice hesitant but genuine, for handling things the other day without, making it worse. I raised an eyebrow but nodded, keeping my tone neutral. You're welcome. Just remember, rules exist for a reason, and enforcement should always be fair. Intimidation only creates resentment. She nodded quickly, almost as if trying to memorize my words. Yes, I understand. I'll be more careful in the future. That was all I needed to hear. I gave her a small smile and turned back to my kayak, sliding it into the water. The reflection of the morning sun shimmered across the lake's surface, making the scene look almost too serene, too picturesque. But beneath the beauty, the dynamic had shifted. Authority was no longer about Marjorie wielding control arbitrarily. Now it was about mutual respect and awareness of limits. As I paddled away, I could feel the tension in the neighborhood easing. The invisible weight of fear she had imposed finally lifting. It was a subtle change, one that might not be immediately noticeable to casual observers, but it mattered. People could enjoy the lake without anxiety, and that small victory felt monumental. Back on the dock later, I paused to take in the view. The water sparkled, the trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the air smelled faintly of pine and fresh water. Marjorie, for her part, had returned to her duties in a quieter, more thoughtful manner. I knew she would never forget the day a simple badge changed, the rules of engagement. But perhaps she had learned something more important: respect, accountability, and the humility to admit when she was wrong. Some battles are won without confrontation, simply by standing firm and letting truth do the work. And on that bright, calm morning by the lake, I felt the rare satisfaction of having done exactly that. The lake, finally, was peaceful again. Enjoying this wild story about HOA drama and unexpected authority? Hit that subscribe button to catch more real-life encounters that take a surprising turn. Give this a like if you found it satisfying, and drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in my shoes?